21. Black celebrities who were killed by their partners. What if the people who said "I love you" were the very ones who pulled the trigger, walked away, or betrayed trust in the darkest hour? Behind the glittering stages and soulful songs. 21. Black celebrities met tragic ends, not from strangers but from partners who turned love into poison. These aren't just stories of fame, they are chilling lessons about how passion can become deadly. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind their final days. And before we dive in, hit subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence so you never miss the stories others are too afraid to tell. Jimi Hendrix. Born in 1942, Jimi Hendrix revolutionized the electric guitar in ways no artist had before or since. His explosive performances, from Purple Haze to his unforgettable rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock, cemented him as the greatest guitarist of all time. Yet behind the fire of his music, his final hours were clouded by confusion, suspicion, and betrayal. On September 18, 1970, Hendrix was found in a London flat he shared with his girlfriend, Monica Dannemann. He had choked on his own vomit after consuming a lethal mix of sleeping pills and red wine. But controversy swirled immediately. Monica's testimony about when she discovered him shifted multiple times, and critics questioned why she delayed calling for help. Some even claimed she had tried to wash out his stomach with more wine, a reckless act that may have worsened his condition. Despite these suspicions, the case was quickly ruled an accidental death, leaving countless questions unanswered. Fans and friends alike felt betrayed not only by the lack of justice, but by the eerie sense that the person closest to Jimi had failed him in his most vulnerable moment. He was just 27 years old, joining the infamous 27 Club of music greats, lost too soon. Do you believe Jimi's death was a tragic accident? Or was there more behind the silence that followed? Jimi Hendrix remains immortal through his music, yet his end stands as a chilling reminder that even the brightest flame can be extinguished, not by enemies, but by carelessness in love. Rick James. Rick James, born in Buffalo in 1948, was the flamboyant super freak of funk. His music defined an era with infectious grooves and unapologetic swagger. But as dazzling as his stage persona was, his personal life was scarred by turbulence, excess, and a relationship that spiraled into chaos. In the early 1990s, Rick became romantically involved with Tanya Hijazi. Their bond was fiery, blending passion music and self-destruction. They fought, reconciled, and clashed again in a cycle that drew the attention of courts and tabloids. Friends said Tanya intensified Rick's worst impulses, fueling drug use and violent confrontations. Others argued Rick dragged her into his storm. Either way, the relationship left deep scars. Police reports document domestic altercations, lawsuits, and public scandals that overshadowed his artistry. By the time Rick reached his later years, his health was already failing. Years of cocaine addiction and high living damaged his heart. In 2004, at just 56 years old, he died of heart failure. In his final years, he was isolated, Tanya gone family distant, and many friends reluctant to revisit the chaos. Love is a hell of a drug, Rick once wrote, and in his case it proved more destructive than any narcotic. Do you think Rick James would have lived longer had he escaped that toxic love sooner? Rick James's story is one of brilliance dimmed by passion gone wrong. His music continues to inspire, but his life is a warning of how love, when poisoned by control and conflict, can be just as lethal as any substance. Minnie Riperton. Minnie Riperton, born in Chicago in 1947, possessed a voice so pure it was often described as angelic. Her 1975 hit, Loving You, co-written with her husband Richard Rudolph, showcased her stunning 5-octave range and became one of the most iconic ballads in history. But behind the beauty of her music was a woman fighting both illness and abandonment. In 1976, Minnie was diagnosed with breast cancer at just 29. Despite undergoing grueling treatments, she continued recording, performing, and smiling on stage as though nothing was wrong. But those closest to her knew she was often attending chemotherapy sessions alone. Friends and nurses recalled how she would quietly sit by hospital doors, seemingly waiting for someone who never came. Richard, her husband and collaborator, was said to be preoccupied with his own career, leaving Minnie to shoulder her battle largely on her own. By 1979, the disease had spread, and Minnie passed away at only 31 years old. Her loss devastated fans and fellow artists, but the greatest tragedy was the lack of emotional support in her last years. She sang of love more beautifully than anyone yet. When she needed it most, it slipped away. Do you think Loving You feels different, knowing Minnie may not have received the same love she poured into that song? Minnie Riperton's legacy is eternal through her music, but her story is a painful reminder that even those who give the world love in abundance can be left to fade in solitude. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke, born in 1931 in Mississippi, is often called the King of Soul. With hits like A Change Is Gonna Come and You Send Me, he shaped the future of soul music and became one of the first black artists to fight for ownership of his work. But while he was breaking barriers in the industry, his personal life was unraveling, ending in one of the most controversial deaths in music history. On December 11, 1964, Sam was shot and killed at the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles. The motel manager claimed she acted in self-defense after Sam burst into her office, searching for a woman who had disappeared with his money and clothes. The official story was accepted quickly, but friends and family always questioned it. Some pointed to tensions in his marriage with Barbara, who was rumored to have had heated arguments with Sam shortly before his trip. Others whispered that his death was less about chance and more about betrayal from those closest to him. Sam's funeral drew tens of thousands, a testament to his cultural impact. Yet behind the tears, doubt lingered. Was this truly a tragic accident? Or was it the result of silent betrayal that went unanswered? Do you believe Sam Cooke's death was an unfortunate incident, or a hidden plot that was never exposed? Sam Cooke was only 33 years old. His death left a void, not just in music but in the civil rights movement he so deeply influenced. His voice promised change, but betrayal and unanswered questions cut his song short. Harold Melvin. Harold Melvin, born in 1939 in Philadelphia, was the founder and guiding force of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. With Teddy Pendergrass as lead singer, the group soared in the 1970s with hits like If You Don't Know Me By Now and Wake Up Everybody. Harold wasn't just a performer. He was a visionary who helped bring Philly soul to the forefront. But despite his contributions, his later years told a darker story of neglect and abandonment. In the 1990s, Harold's health declined due to diabetes and heart disease. Once a commanding presence, he now relied on caretakers and medical attention. Friends who visited recalled that his family rarely came by. Nurses reported weeks passing without a single relative checking in. For a man who had once led a legendary band, he now found himself forgotten in a nursing home. His golden years defined not by love, but by silence. In March 1997, Harold Melvin passed away at 57. There was no grand farewell, no major media tribute, just the quiet passing of a man who had once given the world music filled with passion and hope. Do you think Harold's neglect in his final years shows how fame fades faster than loyalty? Harold Melvin's story is heartbreaking not because of his illness, but because of the absence of those who should have been there. He left behind immortal music, yet in his final chapter, he was left without the warmth of the family and love he had given so freely through song. Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson, born in 1934 in Detroit, rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most electrifying performers in American music history. Nicknamed Mr. Excitement, his stage presence, soaring tenor, and timeless hits like Lonely Teardrops and Higher made him a household name in the late 1950s and 1960s. Yet behind the sparkling smile and magnetic charm, his personal life was turbulent, filled with struggles that ultimately shaped his tragic destiny. In 1961, Jackie's world changed forever. While in a New York hotel room, he was shot by his former lover in what was described as a jealous outburst. The bullet lodged near his spine, and doctors concluded that attempting to remove it would be more dangerous than leaving it inside. For the next 2 decades, Wilson lived with unrelenting back pain, nerve damage, and declining health. This invisible wound not only crippled his body, but also slowly eroded his career. Each performance became a painful balancing act. His voice remained golden, but his movements were no longer as explosive. The tragedy of Jackie Wilson was not only the physical injury, but the cruel irony. The man who gave the world so much joy was undone by someone who once claimed to love him. His decline was slow, almost invisible to the public, until he collapsed on stage in 1975 and never fully recovered. He spent his final years in a nursing home, passing away in 1984 at just 49 years old. Do you think Jackie's story shows how fame can sometimes blind us to the dangers in our personal lives? Jackie Wilson's tale is a chilling reminder that betrayal can come from the closest hands. His legacy as a pioneer of soul endures, but his life serves as a warning of how passion twisted into jealousy can silence even the brightest star. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was born in Chicago in 1945 and raised by his grandmother in St. Louis, where his gospel roots blossomed. His voice was unlike any other, warm, soulful, and filled with a depth of emotion that made classics like A Song for You and his duets with Roberta Flack eternal treasures. Yet behind the music was a man battling inner turmoil and an aching heart that only a few understood. In the 1970s, Donny's personal life became tangled with whispers of a deeper bond with Flack, though the relationship was never confirmed. What was undeniable was that Hathaway often felt betrayed and isolated, even by those closest to him. His paranoia grew. He believed his apartment was bugged, his studio controlled, and his trusted companion turning away. To outsiders, this looked like the unraveling of his mind, but to Donny, it was heartbreak and abandonment magnified. On a cold night in January 1979, his body was discovered below the Essex House Hotel in New York, where he had fallen from the 15th floor. Official reports called it a suicide, attributing it to his struggles with mental illness. But friends and colleagues suspected the loneliness and fractured love in his private life were what pushed him over the edge. If his music was his soul speaking, his death was that soul silenced before it could heal. Do you think the industry could have saved Donny had they taken his cries for help more seriously? Donny Hathaway's story is not just about an artist gone too soon, but a man whose trust in love became his deepest wound. His songs remain alive, but the betrayal he felt lingers as an unhealed echo in music history. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard, born in Detroit in 1943, was a founding member of the Supremes and the powerhouse voice that helped shape Motown's golden era. Before Diana Ross became the face of the group, it was Florence who brought raw soul and emotion to the music that defined a generation. Yet her story is often overshadowed. Her light dimmed not by lack of talent, but by personal struggles and a destructive relationship. After leaving the Supremes in 1967, Florence's career faltered. She married Tommy Chapman, a man described by close friends as controlling and volatile. He reportedly managed her finances to the point that she had little access to her own money and often blocked opportunities for her to return to the spotlight. Once hailed as the heart of America's girl group, Florence found herself cleaning schools and borrowing money to raise her 3 daughters. Her health and spirit deteriorated under the weight of poverty and neglect. In February 1976, she passed away at just 32 years old from cardiac arrest. But those who knew her believed the real cause was a life drained by betrayal and suffocation at home. To the world, she became the forgotten Supreme, a footnote in Motown history when she should have been celebrated as its foundation. How many more artists like Florence do you think were erased from history simply because they lacked the support they deserved? Florence Ballard's story is heartbreaking, not because she lacked talent, but because the love and loyalty promised to her instead became chains. She remains a cautionary tale of how dreams can be destroyed not by the industry alone, but by the very person meant to stand beside you. Tammy Terrell. Tammy Terrell. Born Thomasina Montgomery in 1945, was a radiant star who seemed destined for greatness. By the age of 22, she had already recorded with James Brown and later signed with Motown, where her duets with Marvin Gaye, Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All I Need to Get By became timeless classics. Her voice carried warmth and resilience, but behind her stage smile was a woman enduring heartbreak and abuse. Before her partnership with Gaye, Tammy was romantically linked to James Brown. Friends and colleagues recalled troubling moments she would arrive at the studio with bruises, her face swollen and her eyes red from tears. Yet in an era where women were told to keep private struggles hidden, her suffering remained in the shadows. The weight of stress and trauma compounded her health problems, and in 1967 she collapsed on stage in Marvin's arms, an image seared into music history. Diagnosed with a brain tumor, she endured 8 surgeries over the next 3 years. Despite her resilience, Tammy passed away in 1970 at just 24 years old. Marvin Gaye never fully recovered from her loss, later confessing that her death changed the course of his music and his life forever. Do you think Tammy's story might have been different if the industry had protected young women instead of silencing their pain? Tammy Terrell remains one of Motown's brightest yet most tragic figures, an artist whose light was stolen by both illness and the betrayals of love. Her songs endure, but they echo with what could have been. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman, born in 1949, possessed one of the most emotionally charged voices of her era. Standing tall at nearly 6 feet with regal beauty and commanding presence, she delivered unforgettable performances in songs like Living All Alone and Old Friend. Yet her music was often an extension of her reality: loneliness, heartbreak, and the constant struggle to find lasting love. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Phyllis built a reputation as a powerhouse on stage, but her private life was riddled with painful relationships. She often dated high-profile men, businessmen, musicians, but none stayed long enough to give her stability. "I love deeply, but they always leave before I'm ready," she once confessed. Alcohol dependency and bouts of depression compounded her despair. Friends said she tried to quit drinking to fight her demons, but betrayal and abandonment always seemed to return. By 1995, the weight became unbearable. On June 30th, hours before she was set to perform at the Apollo Theater, she took her own life at just 45 years old. She left a note quietly confirming the loneliness that had long haunted her music. Do you think the raw sadness in Phyllis's songs was her way of crying for help that no one truly answered? Phyllis Hyman's legacy is bittersweet. Her voice still resonates with unmatched depth, but her death serves as a chilling reminder that even those who sing of heartbreak most beautifully can be living through it most painfully. Curtis Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield, born in 1942 in Chicago, was more than just a musician. He was a voice of revolution. With People Get Ready and the iconic Superfly soundtrack, he crafted songs that blended soul with social consciousness, giving hope to communities fighting for justice. Yet his own life story ended not in triumph, but in a quiet tragedy marked by pain and abandonment. In 1990, during an outdoor performance in Brooklyn, disaster struck. A lighting rig collapsed on Curtis, crushing his neck and leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. Though confined to a wheelchair, his mind and spirit remained sharp. He continued to compose recording vocals line by line while lying flat, proving that even physical immobility couldn't silence his creativity. But the deepest wound was not the accident. It was the growing absence of his wife. Friends whispered that she had quietly withdrawn, no longer the steady presence he once leaned on. He was surrounded by nurses, colleagues, and admirers, but the one hand he most wanted to hold wasn't there. Despite his suffering, Curtis never stopped writing. His final works carried a mournful tenderness, as if they were love letters to the life he once had. He passed away in 1999 at just 57 years old, remembered for his courage but mourned for the loneliness that shadowed his last decade. Do you think Curtis's story proves that emotional abandonment can hurt as much as any physical wound, Curtis Mayfield remains a towering figure in soul and protest music, but his end reminds us that even legends who lift the world sometimes fall unseen in their own homes. Eddie Kendricks. Eddie Kendricks, born in 1939 in Alabama, was the falsetto voice that gave the Temptations their heavenly sound. Hits like Just My Imagination and Get Ready showcased his unique range, making him one of Motown's brightest stars. But after leaving the group in 1971, Eddie faced a quieter, more personal battle that ended in heartbreaking solitude. In the early 1990s, Eddie was diagnosed with lung cancer. Decades of smoking had caught up with him, stripping away the voice that once soared above Motown harmonies. Though he continued performing for a time, his condition worsened quickly. What devastated his friends most was the absence of support. His ex-wife, once a pillar during his peak, reportedly turned away when she learned of his illness. Even old colleagues were slow to reach out. Friends recalled Eddie as dignified, never one to beg for sympathy, but they could see the pain in his eyes. He died in 1992 at just 52 years old, leaving behind whispers that the loneliest part of his journey wasn't cancer, but the silence from those who once claimed to love him. Do you believe fame makes true loyalty harder to find once the spotlight fades? Eddie Kendricks' final years were a stark contrast to his glorious rise. He gave the world unforgettable music, yet when his voice was gone, love and support seemed to vanish with it. His passing was not dramatic, but it was devastating, a low note that lingers in Motown history. Sylvester. Sylvester James Jr., born in Los Angeles in 1947, was unapologetically himself in a world that demanded conformity. Known simply as Sylvester, he became the radiant queen of disco, dazzling audiences with songs like You Make Me Feel Mighty Real and Dance Disco Heat. His soaring falsetto and glittering stage presence made him an icon for the LGBTQ+ community, proving that authenticity could be revolutionary. But while he gave love freely to the world, the love he needed most disappeared when illness struck. By the late 1980s, Sylvester was diagnosed with AIDS, a disease that at the time carried not only physical pain, but devastating stigma. Friends described how his once lively frame grew frail, yet he still put on makeup, kept his head high, and smiled for those around him. What broke hearts most was his partner's sudden absence. As Sylvester's health declined, his lover quietly slipped away, leaving him to face his final days without the comfort of the person he trusted most. In December 1988, at just 41 years old, Sylvester died in San Francisco. Fans mourned, but the tragedy was intensified by the loneliness he endured. His story highlights how fear and prejudice can shatter even the most intimate bonds. Do you think Sylvester's partner abandoned him because of stigma or out of fear of facing death up close? Sylvester's music still pulses in clubs and pride celebrations worldwide, but his ending is a chilling reminder even the brightest lights can be dimmed when love fails to stay. Al Jackson Jr. Al Jackson Jr., born in Memphis in 1935, was the rhythmic backbone of soul. As the drummer for Booker T and the MG Stax Records house band, he helped create classics like Green Onions and backed legends such as Otis Redding and Sam and Dave. His beats were steady, strong, and timeless, yet his life ended violently, shrouded in suspicion. On October 1, 1975, Al was gunned down in his Memphis home. He was shot multiple times, and his wife Denise claimed it was the work of a burglar who overpowered her. But many in the Memphis music scene whispered a darker possibility. Just months earlier, Denise herself had shot Al in a domestic dispute, though he survived that incident. Their marriage had long been described as volatile, filled with jealousy and control. Police never charged anyone, and the case was closed without resolution. To this day, many believe Al's murder was not random, but born of betrayal from within his own household. He was only 39 years old, his life cut short at the height of his talent. Do you think Al Jackson Jr. was a victim of a botched robbery or of love turned deadly? His drumming continues to echo on records that shaped American music, but his unsolved death leaves a hollow beat, a reminder that sometimes the danger isn't on the streets, but waiting at home. Walter Scott. Walter Scott, born in 1943, was the velvet-voiced lead singer of Bob Cuban and the In Men best remembered for the haunting 1966 hit The Cheater. The irony of that song's lyrics would later define his tragic fate in one of the most chilling domestic betrayals in music history. In December 1983, Walter mysteriously vanished. For nearly 3 years, his family and fans were left in anguish, with his wife claiming he had simply run off with another woman. But the devastating truth surfaced in 1987, when police discovered his decomposed body stuffed inside a cistern in Missouri. His hands and feet had been bound, a clear sign of foul play. Investigators soon uncovered the truth. His wife Joanne and her lover, an insurance salesman, had orchestrated his murder to collect on his life insurance policies. The betrayal was shocking not only because of its brutality, but because it was meticulously covered up by the person who shared his home. Walter's widow continued life as if nothing had happened, even cashing in on the very money tied to his death. Do you think the lyrics of The Cheater feel eerily prophetic now, as if Walter unknowingly sang his own fate? Walter Scott's murder remains one of the darkest stories in soul music. He was only 43 when his life was stolen, not by strangers, but by the woman who once vowed to love him forever. Barry White. Barry White, born in 1944 in Galveston, Texas, was the maestro of romance. With his deep baritone voice and lush orchestral arrangement, songs like Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe, and You're the First, the Last, My Everything turned him into the ultimate symbol of passion. But in the final act of his life, the man who defined love songs found himself surrounded by indifference. By the early 2000s, Barry's health declined sharply due to kidney failure and long-standing health issues. During this period, those closest to him noticed something unsettling. His wife, Glodian White, who once shared the stage and the spotlight, had grown emotionally distant. Reports suggested that she was rarely present during his hospitalizations, and that Barry spent much of his last years without the affection he had given so freely through his music. In July 2003, Barry White passed away at just 58 years old. Fans mourned his loss, but those who knew him best said the real heartbreak was that he died feeling abandoned in the very home where love was supposed to live. Do you think it's harder for legends like Barry White to receive true love when the world only sees them as icons? Barry's music still stirs hearts around the world, yet his death is a poignant reminder even the man who gave love a soundtrack can end his days in silence when intimacy turns cold. Ray Charles. Ray Charles, born in 1930 in Georgia, was a pioneer who transformed American music. Blind from the age of 7, he fused gospel, blues, jazz, and R&B to create an entirely new sound, earning the title The Genius. With timeless hits like Georgia on My Mind and Hit the Road, Jack, his voice became the soul of a generation. Yet despite the fame, fortune, and family he built, Ray's final years revealed a devastating truth. Even legends can die in isolation. In the early 2000s, Ray battled liver disease, his health slowly declining. Despite having 12 children and a long career filled with love songs, he spent his last days longing for the presence of the woman who was supposed to be by his side. According to staff, Ray would often ask for his wife only to smile sadly when she never appeared. Though cared for by medical teams, the emotional absence of family was what hurt most. His house was full of people, yet he was alone. On June 10, 2004, Ray Charles passed away at 73 in Beverly Hills. His funeral drew thousands, but the emptiness he carried in his final months remained a hidden tragedy. Do you think legends like Ray Charles are sometimes loved more by the world than by those closest to them? Ray Charles's life was larger than music, but his end was marked not by applause, but by silence. His story shows that even the strongest voices can fade when love is absent in the moments it's needed most. Melvin Franklin. Melvin Franklin, born David Melvin English in 1942, was the unmistakable bass voice of the Temptations. His deep, resonant tone anchored classics like My Girl Papa Was a Rollin' Stone and Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Known as the gentle giant of the group, he spent decades shaping the Motown sound. Yet behind the harmony of success, his final years were marked by pain, illness, and emotional abandonment. Melvin suffered from severe rheumatoid arthritis starting in his 30s, a condition that gradually crippled him. Long-term steroid treatments weakened his immune system, and by the early 1990s, neurological complications left him struggling to move and perform. Though he fought to remain with the Temptations, the man who once brought joy to millions was battling a body that betrayed him. More devastating than the illness, however, was the growing distance from his family. Friends recalled how his wife grew less present, and his children, busy with their own lives, visited infrequently. In 1995, at the age of 52, Melvin passed away from heart failure. His bandmates remembered his quiet dignity, but also the loneliness in his eyes. His house, they said, felt more like a hotel filled with staff, but lacking love. Do you believe that artists like Melvin, who gave so much to the world, deserve better care from those closest to them when their health declines? Melvin Franklin's death was not loud or scandalous, but it was deeply tragic. His voice still rumbles through Motown history, but the silence in his final days speaks volumes about the cost of fame and forgotten love. Harry Wack. Harry Womack, born in 1945 in Cleveland, was the younger brother of legendary soul singer Bobby Womack. A gifted vocalist and bass player, Harry often performed with the Valentinos, the family group that blended gospel and R&B with raw energy. While not as famous as Bobby, Harry carried a quiet strength and a deep emotional style that won him respect among his peers. Sadly, his life ended not in music, but in violence at home. In March 1974, Harry was killed in his apartment after a heated argument with his girlfriend. Reports say the fight began over jealousy and escalated to the point where she pulled a knife, fatally stabbing him. He was just 28 years old. The suddenness of his death sent shockwaves through the Womack family and the music community. His brothers were devastated, with Bobby later admitting that Harry's passing left a permanent scar on both his family and his music. Unlike some stars whose deaths were shrouded in mystery, Harry's tragedy was painfully clear, a promising life cut short by uncontrolled anger in a relationship that should have brought comfort, not destruction. Do you think Harry's death reflects how easily passion can turn deadly when jealousy takes control? Though Harry Womack's name isn't as widely remembered as Bobby's, his death stands as one of the starkest reminders in soul music history that love, when twisted by rage, can become fatal. His voice may be lesser known, but his story carries a lesson that echoes louder than any song. Willie Mae Thornton. Willie Mae Thornton, better known as Big Mama Thornton, was born in Alabama in 1926 and became one of the most groundbreaking figures in blues. Her powerful voice and fearless stage presence paved the way for countless artists. She first rose to fame with her 1952 hit, Hound Dog, which Elvis Presley later turned into an international phenomenon. But while Elvis became a legend from her song Big Mama, remained underappreciated, battling an industry that often exploited black women while denying them credit. Thornton lived her life as a nonconformist, rejecting traditional expectations of women in music. She sang with raw honesty about pain, betrayal, and resilience. Yet her final years were marked not by applause, but by abandonment. Friends revealed that as she fell ill with liver disease in the early 1980s, her partner withdrew from her life. The woman who had once been by her side during tours and performances left when Big Mama needed her most. She passed away in Los Angeles in July 1984 at the age of 57, largely unnoticed by the mainstream press. A friend once remarked bitterly, "She died as if she had never existed." A cruel irony for someone who helped shape rock and roll and blues history. Do you think Big Mama's erasure in her final years proves how often black women pioneers are overlooked by the very culture they created? Her story is not just one of a great artist gone too soon, but of betrayal by both the industry that stole her voice and the love that abandoned her in her last days. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack, born in 1944 in Cleveland, was a soul prodigy who lived a life as turbulent as the songs he wrote. Rising from the Valentinos with his brothers Bobby, soon became one of R&B's most influential figures, penning hits like Across 110th Street and If You Think You're Lonely Now. But his personal life often mirrored his music, full of conflict, passion, and heartbreak. After the shocking death of his mentor and friend Sam Cooke in 1964, Bobby scandalized the music world by marrying Cooke's widow Barbara just 3 months later. The relationship drew heavy criticism and fractured his ties with many in the industry. Over the years, Bobby became entangled in a series of tumultuous romances, often marked by control, jealousy, and betrayal. Some partners accused him of emotional abuse. Others left quietly, leaving behind rumors of manipulation and broken trust. In his later years, Bobby faced serious health battles, diabetes, pneumonia, and Alzheimer's disease. Yet what hurt him most wasn't the illnesses, but the fact that many of the people who had once shared his life were nowhere to be found. Friends and colleagues noted that during his decline, he was mostly cared for by nurses rather than loved ones. When he passed away in 2014 at the age of 70, only a small circle attended his funeral. Do you think Bobby's turbulent choices in love made it inevitable that he would die without the companionship he longed for? Bobby Womack left behind a rich musical legacy, but his life was a storm of love turned toxic. His story proves that even the most gifted artists can be undone when passion becomes control and devotion turns into betrayal. In the end, the stories of these 21 Black legends remind us that the greatest danger did not come from the stage or the spotlight, but from the very people who once promised to love them. Fame could not shield them from betrayal. Abandonment or jealousy turned deadly. Their lives force us to confront a painful truth. When love becomes a weapon, even the brightest stars can be silenced. At Legends of Black Excellence, we honor their voices, but now we ask you, were these tragedies inevitable, or could true loyalty have saved them? Share your thoughts below.